All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the 13th in our series of webinars. My name is Gabriella Gallagher, and I'm the National Chair of Canadian Friends of Peace Now. We're partners to Peace Now, Shalom Achshav, which is Israel's leading peace movement and which promotes the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You can find out more about us and, if you wish, support us with a donation by going to our website, and that's peacenowcanada.org, and just click on the donate button. Our webinar today will be recorded and posted to that website. Now, we are very honored to have two distinguished guests with us today. Hagit Ofran and Kutaybah Odeh. Hagit is a senior member of Peace Now's Settlement Watch team. She is widely recognized as one of Israel's foremost experts on West Bank settlements, including issues related to East Jerusalem. She keeps a close eye on the settlement enterprise. She publicizes protests and educates about settler projects. And she has been doing this important work for many years, I should say decades now. Kutaybah Odeh is a Palestinian who lives with his family, I believe, in Silwan. And they are threatened with eviction because of settler actions. And he will speak firsthand about the ordeal he and others like him face. Our moderator today is our new board member, Daniela Weissman. Daniela brings skills, knowledge, and a very welcome, youthful face to our board. As always, we welcome your questions, which I will pose during the latter part of our webinar. I ask you to please type in your questions at any time using the Q&A feature, which is on the Zoom toolbar near the bottom of your screen. Please don't use the chat function for questions. By the way, if you find the chat distracting, just turn it off by clicking again on the chat icon, which is at the bottom of your screen, not the little X at the top of your screen. Please don't do that. Yes, so I will now turn things over to Hagit to give us an overview of our topic, the displacement of Palestinians in East Jerusalem.
Thank you very much. Good evening from Jerusalem. Good afternoon for you all. So I'm Hagit Ofran. I'm from Peace Now. I work at the Settlement Watch for more than a decade now. We're trying to follow what's going on in settlements in order to bring it all the time to the public awareness, to the public agenda. And part of what we are doing, or the idea is to not to let go of the issue of settlement activity so that mainly the Israeli public will know what's going on, that every move by the government will have some argument, public debate, and that's why we are devoting so much of our time to this issue, because we believe that the key for peace would be a two-state solution, and settlements are the obstacle for that. So let us dive now into the issue of Jerusalem, and for that I would try to show you a presentation. On the screen, you can see a map of Jerusalem, the way it was until 1967. You can see the green line, which was the border between Israel and Jordan until 67. You can see in blue West Jerusalem, and in brown the Palestinian towns and villages that were there before 67 and also after 67. And the old city, as you can see, was on the Jordanian side, and including what is south of the old city, the Silwan neighborhood, village, that is our focus of today. And when Israel in 1967 occupied all the West Bank, unlike all of the West Bank that was never annexed to Israel, in Jerusalem, the government annexed 70 square kilometers to Jerusalem. This is the red line that you see here. And as you can see, Palestinian neighborhoods were also annexed to Israel. And at the time, there were 70,000 Palestinians. Today, we're talking about 350,000 Palestinians that became Israeli residents, found themselves under Israeli law. They never got citizenship. They are residents, which is a different status. They cannot vote for the parliament, for the Knesset. They have social security. They have the right to live, to work in Israel, but not to vote, and not to have a Israeli passport. And in some circumstances, this residency may be taken from them. And the Israeli government, in order to make sure that Jerusalem will stay forever united as a capital of Israel, decided to put up settlements around East Jerusalem so that it will not be able to be a capital for a Palestinian state. And we see three kinds of settlements in Jerusalem. The first kind was, as you can see, there are some white areas in this map, areas that were not built at the time in 67, open areas. And what Israel did was to confiscate the lands of most of those lands and to build settlements or neighborhoods, places like Gilo and Har Choma and Pisgat Ze'ev, if you know, and Ramot Eshkol. All of them are neighborhoods that were built after 67 on land that was confiscated in East Jerusalem for Israelis. Today we have more than 200,000 Israelis living in East Jerusalem. So that's the first kind of settlement that is meant to disconnect East Jerusalem from the West Bank, so that the Palestinian East Jerusalem will not be able to be part of a Palestinian state, and there will not be a capital of the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. So that's one kind of settlement. The second kind of settlement is settlements inside Palestinian neighborhoods, and this is the topic of our talk today. This is a map of the area of the old city. You can see the old city here. All the brown areas are Palestinian neighborhoods surrounding the old city. All the red dots are Israeli settler houses that managed to take over their houses in many kinds of ways and settled in it. So the second kind of settlement would be those houses that are scattered inside Palestinian neighborhoods, especially around the old city. I will say in brackets, the third kind of settlement is the touristic kind of settlement. You see around the old city, the green park. It's all a national park that is declared in order to maintain that the surrounding of the old city will not be built. But the touristic settlement is another way to encourage Israelis to be in those areas of the Palestinian areas. And the idea is to make sure that those Palestinian neighborhoods become more Jewish, and therefore Israel will not be able to give it up. Because if we are talking about a peace agreement, about a compromise in Jerusalem, eventually East Jerusalem must be the capital of the Palestinian state. And what the settlers and the government are trying to do is to make it more Israeli, so that the Israeli public will not be able to give it up. So we have around the old city, we have Silwan in the south, Wadi Khilwe, Batan El Hawa, which is part of Silwan, Ras El Amud, Mount of Olives, Aswane, Sheikh Jarrah. All of that settlements are part of the ring around the old city, and we are focusing on Silwan mainly. And the way it looks like is a house in the surrounding Palestinian neighborhood. Usually you will see a flag, an Israel flag on it, guards on the roof usually, and also on the streets if the children need to go to school or to the violin lesson or wherever they go, they have a guard that will walk them in the streets because of the high tension in those areas. And in order to enter a house, usually after a long legal battle, there will be a big police operation. This picture is from the Siam house in July 19, where they got on the roof in order to kick out the family and allow the settlers in after a verdict of court saying that they need to be evicted. What I'm saying is that all the issue of settlements inside Palestinian neighborhoods is not just an issue of we want to buy a house, they are selling a house, and it's like Jews are allowed to live wherever they want, and it's just a matter of business or something like that. It's far from being an issue or innocent issue. It's a political issue. It's a bit. We are in a national conflict. We are surrounded around the old city, which is the core of our conflict, if you want, the symbolic core of our conflict, the Temple Mount, Haram Sharif. It's very, very delicate, and it's never innocent. So now I'm going to dive into the story of Batan El Hawa. This is a picture of some of the people that are today under threat of being evicted from their homes. Many of them already got verdicts from courts that they need to be evicted because of lawsuits that were filed against them by settlers, and we will shortly explain on what basis. And they are here in Batan El Hawa. You can see you have some impression of the neighborhood. You see very narrow street. It's the widest street in Batan El Hawa, and the houses, the way they are, very crowded. Not the richest neighborhood in Jerusalem at all. And this is where the settlers want to enter. Today we're talking about around 700 people that are in proceedings, that each of them will have at home such a pile of documents. This is of the family of Abdallah Abu Nab, that was already kicked out of his house, and now he needs to pay the settlers more than half a million shekels, because they beat him in court, lost his house. And this is a picture of Batan El Hawa itself. You see very crowded, and almost all of the houses that you see in this picture are under threat of eviction. Settlers manage to take over or to go into or to buy or to take rights of, depends who you ask, on these 3 houses. Kutaybah's house is also in this picture, I think this one. He will talk about it soon. Kutaybah Odeh, who's with us tonight. Another neighborhood under similar threat that I want to mention before I tell you on what basis all this is taking place is Sheikh Jarrah. This map, you can see all the houses that are marked in blue are already settlements, already settled took it. All the reds are those who have court cases that are ongoing, and those with the frame, the light blue frame, already got verdicts to be evicted. Only last week, the district court rejected the appeal of 4 of the houses here. And we're talking about hundreds of people that are under threat of being kicked out of their houses in East Jerusalem. And why is it all happening, and why is it so dramatic? For that, I'm going back to 1948, the year of the establishment of the State of Israel. This is a map of the State of Israel just after it was established, after the war of 48. All the red dots are Palestinian villages and towns that were evicted, destroyed by the Israelis, by Israel, and all of the Palestinians who lived there became refugees, either went to Gaza, West Bank, Syria, Lebanon, and all around. And they are refugees. That's the Palestinian refugees. And one can argue about what happened or how it happened or the outcome. But one thing was clear, that the government of Israel at the time found itself in a small country with millions of dunams that belongs to Palestinians, that Israel had no intention to allow them to return, and they had to decide what to do with those lands. And they decided that those lands will be used for the development of the country of Israel, and therefore it was kind of confiscated, and they legislated a law in 1950 called the Absentee Property Law that says that Israel took all those lands and all those properties from the Palestinians and that they cannot get it back. So, and as I said, maybe at the time there could be justifications for that. Today, of course, I think it's not, Israel still will need to compensate all of the people that lost their properties, of course, but it will be unrealistic to allow them to return, and that's one of the most hard or most important issues in our conflict. And I'm mentioning all that because it has an important connection to what is going on in Silwan. And this is a map of Jerusalem in 48. Neighborhoods. As you can see, in West Jerusalem, there were several Palestinian neighborhoods like Bakaa, Katamon, Talbiyeh, Lifta, Malcha, and Karem, Dir Yassin. All of them had to leave during the war or were kicked out and became refugees. We are talking about 35,000 Palestinians who lost their homes in East Jerusalem. At the same time, there were small communities of Jews in what is now East Jerusalem. In Sheikh Jarrah, there was a small neighborhood. In Musrara, a few houses. In the Old City, most of them. And in Silwan, Batan el-Hawa, there was some kind of Israeli or Jewish ownership that is now in courts, but in 48, all of them also had to leave and lost their properties in this 48 war and became not refugees, but citizens of Israel. Israel immediately gave them full citizenship in Israel and compensated them for what they lost in East Jerusalem. They got based, and now, if I remember, if I go now to 67, Israel annexed all this land to Israel, and we had to decide what to do with those properties that under the Jordanians were under the management of the Jordanian custodian of enemy property. Now it becomes part of Israel, and the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, had to decide what to do with those properties, and the Knesset legislated a law in 1970 that applies in East Jerusalem that says, among other things, that if an owner wants to return to ownership or to his house, they can do it. And based on this law, which as you can see immediately, it's discriminatory law, because we have a law for the Palestinians in 1950, we legislated that they cannot return. But in 1970, to properties in East Jerusalem that were lost in 48, we legislated that they can return. And based on that law, settlers started in the 80s, and more so today, to take over the ownership from the heirs of the Jewish heirs of the original owners, and then to sue the Palestinians out. And in the case of Batan el Hawa in Silwan, it was not an ownership of a person, but it was a Jewish trust that was established in order to help the poor Yemenite Jews in the late 19th century. And they built for them some housing in Silwan. And this trust actually stopped to exist in 1938 because the British mandate told the Jews to leave. But anyway, in 1996, the settlers managed to renew this trust, to revive it. And in 2001, they were nominated to run this trust by the Israeli court, and they got the ownership. And in the name of that trust that was built in the end of the 19th century in order to help the Yemenite Jews, they are now suing hundreds of Palestinians out of their houses, those houses that they were living in sometimes for 50 years, 60 years, without anybody telling them that they are living in property that was allegedly or really belonged to a Jewish trust. And suddenly they are not the owners and they need to leave. And that's a very hard case to fight legally because of that 1970 law that says you can return, you can take it back. And based on that, the settlers are winning in courts and the Palestinians are losing. So we are facing mass displacement in Silwan and in Sheikh Jarrah. And we in Peace Now are trying to fight against it because it's not a legal issue, it's a political matter. 2 weeks ago, we had a big demonstration in Silwan, something that was very, very powerful, very moving, of hundreds of Israelis in Silwan together with Palestinians saying no to the evictions. We connected it with the demonstrations against Netanyahu. We marched to the Prime Minister's residence, to the main demonstration there. It was very powerful, and we hope that we can continue the fight against one of the biggest injustices that our generation or my city is about to view. And I remind me to explain why I'm saying that it's not a legal matter, but a political one. But that's my presentation for now.
Thank you, Hagit, and thank you, Kutaybah and Dr. Amani, for being with us here today. The first question goes to Kutaybah. Please tell us your story, how long you lived in Silwan, and how have you and your family been affected by the actions of the settlers and the evictions?
تحكي عن حالك وبدك تحكي عن قصتك وقضاء أنت وعائلتك في البستان.
Good evening. My name is Kutaybah Jum'a Khadr Odeh Muhammad Ahmad Mahmoud Al-Hulisi. This is my 7 grandparents. I am 27 years. I am social worker. I live in Silwan, and I have 3 houses. They have 3 stories in 3 neighborhoods in Silwan. 3 houses under 2 houses under demolition and 1 house under eviction. And more than details, I want to Dr. Amani to help translate, because I want to speak more clearly.
Hello, I am Dr. Amani. I am a relative for Kutaybah, and also I am from Silwan. So today I will help Kutaybah in translation because he wants to speak more clearly about what's happening in Silwan, and especially in Batn al-Hawa. And for that he will use Arabic words, and I will translate for him.
في الإشكالية اللي احنا عم بتواجهنا اليوم في بلدة سلوان هي قديمة جديدة. احنا أنا كعائلة ممكن أكون مثال للعائلات الفلسطينية الأخرى في هاي المنطقة. احنا نتحدث عني أنا وأبوي وأمي وإخوتي كعائلة ممتدة. عنا 3 قضايا في المحاكم.
The story of the neighborhoods of Silwan is not a new story. It's an old story that began from a long time. So even if we have 3 houses for my family in Silwan, those 3 houses have 3 different stories, and we have 3 different suits in courts for those houses. The 3 houses are threatened for demolishing and evaluation. And although I am an educated young man, I live daily under the threat of displacement. We have inherited those houses from my grandfather, and my grandfather inherited it from his parents. So this is a long story that began from a long time.
أنا أخصائي اجتماعي social worker، بس المفروض إنه أنا اللي أدعم وأعطي الأمان للناس وأقويهم، ولكن أنا كشاب اليوم متعلم وبعيش في هاي المنطقة. أنا حد ذاتي أنا بنفسي بدي مين يساعدني ويدعمني، لأنه بصراحة من حد ما أنا كبرت على الدنيا ووعيت، وأنا لغاية اليوم ما في أي أفق مستقبلي، أي رؤية لحياة طبيعية، لأنه إحنا هون بصراحة ما بنعيش حياة طبيعية وبنخاف. أنا هلا موجود معاكم على الزوم، بس ما بعرف شو الساعة القادمة راح تكون، شو راح يكون تفاصيلها.
Kutaybah is speaking that as he is a social worker and he work to support other people and to give them psychological support, he as a young man from Jerusalem need who support him and give him psychological support, as he have a lot of issues and a lot of demolishing orders for his houses and his relative houses. He see that even he know what he is doing now, as he is with us on the Zoom, but he will not know what will happen in the next hour. So he live in fear of losing everything in one moment.
احنا بنتحدث عن قضية جماعية، هي مش قضية فردية. قضيتنا بتحكي عن مئات الأفراد مش فرد واحد. حسب القانون الدولي اللي احنا اليوم عم نعاني منه في عام 2021 احنا بنتحدث عن جريمة حرب جماعية حسب القانون الدولي، لأنه احنا بنتحدث عن آلاف الأفراد اللي بدهم يتهجروا، بدهم بيعانوا من ترانسفير جديد في هذا المكان. نتحدث عن عدة أحياء في بلدة سلوان، ما نتحدث عن حي واحد، عم نتحدث عن بطن الهوى، حي البستان، وادي حلوة، وادي الربابة، حي عين اللوزة، وادي يصول. كل هاي الأحياء بحجج مختلفة، إشي تحت البلدية والهدم، وإشي من قبل الجمعيات الاستيطانية عطيرة كهنيم والعاد بحجج الإخلاء. فإحنا نتحدث عن جريمة حرب جماعية لتهجير هذول السكان، عملية تطهير عرقي بصراحة.
Kutaybah says that we are not talking about individual stories. Here we are talking about a collective war crime that is happening against a lot of people from Silwan and a lot of neighborhood in Silwan, because there is a crime that of displacement, and this is for the international law is a collective war crime. He said also that settlers here who come instead of the Arab people and to live in their homes are supported by Al-Aad and Atirat Kuhunim, and Arab people are forced to demolish from their houses.
يعني كنت بتمنى انه انا اوعى في ظروف طبيعيه وفي واقع شوي طبيعي. للاسف احنا موجودين في مدينه القدس. القدس حسب الاتفاقيات الدوليه هي مدينه محتله، ومفروض انه احنا كمان يتم تعاملنا بكل شيء، بكل مناحي الحياه بطريقه كريمه، حتى احنا كمان نعيش ويكون لنا مستقبل. الا انه للاسف احنا يعني بيتم تصميم سيناريوهات من قبل مخرجين لاخراجنا من هذا المكان. اليوم احنا في بطن الهوى بنتحدث عن ما يقارب 700 فرد موجودين في 86 عائله، هذول معرضين للتهجير القسري بحجة ملكية يهود اليمن قبل 130 عام لهذا الحي. احنا اليوم في حي البستان بيتنا الثاني، نتحدث عن 100 عائلة موجودين في 100 بيت عليهم قرارات هدم من قبل البلدية من عام 2004 لحجة إقامة حديقة وربطها في مدينة داود. بيتنا الثالث في حي وادي يصول، هناك ما يزيد عن 80 عائلة. هذول العائلات كلهم برضو مهددين بالتهجير القسري لربط هاي الأراضي في حدائق التيانت. ف يعني اللي بنظر للموضوع عن قرب بيلاحظ انه في دولة عبر أوجه مختلفة، عبر أسماء مختلفة، كلهم عندهم هدف واحد، كلهم عندهم رؤية واحدة، هو إخراجنا وتطهيرنا من هذا المكان، لا طبعا إحلال مستوطنين محلنا.
Jerusalem is an occupied city and should be treated as occupied city, but unfortunately people here are treated with unrespect and with inhumanity. Thousands of reasons are given to displace the people here and to give the right for settlers to come and live in their houses, and every neighborhood have a different reason for being demolished or evacuated. For example, Batn al-Hawa neighborhood, the reason that they said that the ownership of the place there is for the Jews from Yemen. So people now have to evacuated from their houses because of the historical right for Yemen Jews. For Al-Bustan neighborhood, there is almost 100 family live in Al-Bustan, and all the neighborhood is having demolishing orders, and that because they have no license for the house. And each neighborhood in Silwan have a different story that gives the right for the government of Israel to throw out the people who live in the house and the citizens, and give the right for the settler to come and live in the homes of them.
يعني وأنا عمري 12 عام طلعت في أول مسيرة، أول مظاهرة اللي طلعت من سلوان لأحياء الثانية بسبب في هذاك الوقت وأنا عمري 12 عام، عشان بيتنا في حي البستان كان مهدد بالهدم وما زال. ومن تقريبا شهر طلعنا مع حركة السلام الآن في مظاهرة وأنا عمري 27 سنة عشان في عنا بيت مهدد بالإخلاء. ف يعني الصورة واضحة كيف الفكرة. من عمر 12 سنة المعاناة موجودة، ولما صار عمري 27 سنة المعاناة موجودة. بس اللي أنا بدي أكد عليه اليوم لكل المتضامنين اللي بيآمنوا دائما في العدالة، لكل الشركاء الحقيقيين اللي اليوم موجودين معانا ومهتمين وعم بيسمعونا، إحنا أسماء، إحنا مش أرقام، إحنا ماضي وإحنا حاضر وإحنا مستقبل، وإحنا بنحب الحياة، كثير بنحب الحياة، يعني متعلمين وبنسافر وبنكتشف حضارات وبنتعلم تجارب ومأمنين إنه راح يكون في إلنا حرية في يوم من الأيام، يعني مأمنين في المستقبل اللي راح يكون في إلنا إحنا كشباب راح يكون في أمان. يعني بالدرجة الأولى هو الأمان موفر لنا بعيدا عن كل الممارسات اللي عم تتمارس اتجاهنا لمضايقتنا ولعمل حياة لنا غير طبيعية.
When Kutaybah was 12 years old, he came out for the first time with the people because the reason was that his demolishing the demolishing order of his house in Al-Bustan neighborhood. Before a month, also Kutaybah go out with people to street for demonstration. And now the reason was the evacuation of his house in Batn al-Hawa. All this time the suffering continues and does not appear, and it also increased. But he has a word for all solidarity. People out there. Everyone have a different story. We have a past, present, and the future to live, and we are overall human beings. We are educated. We are people who know and believe in freedom, safety, and peace, and we demand with it. So we have the right to live and to have a safe home and a safe place to be in.
احنا يعني عم نتوجه للمحاكم واحنا عارفين انه القاضي والمستوطن اللي رافع القضيه علينا في بطن الهوى والبلديه هم جميعهم بيشتغلوا لنفس الفيجن، لنفس الهدف. ولكن احنا ايماننا دائما انه يعني حيكون في بالاخر عداله، يعني وبنحاول دائما، يعني رحنا للمحكمة الأولى في الصلح والمحكمة الثانية في المركزية والمحكمة الثالثة في العليا، وجميع المحاكم كانت تأكد على إخلاءنا من منازلنا وأحقية المستوطنين لهاي المنازل، إلا إنه إحنا بنصارع لكسب المزيد دائما من الوقت. إحنا عزل، إحنا ما بنملك شيء، بس بنملك شغلة واحدة هي الإرادة، وهي الصمود والبقاء في هاي البيوت، لأنه جدران البيوت حاملة صورنا، صوتنا، ضحكتنا وإحنا أطفال، لعبنا، كل يعني أحلامنا وطموحنا موجودة في هاي الأرض وفي هاي البيوت وفي هذا المكان. ففكره انه احنا نطلع لمحل ثاني ممكن جاء يعني هي قابله، لانه بالنهايه بالمقابل انه هو عنده قوه وقوه كبيره، وممكن باي وقت يجي بقوات مدججه في ساعات متاخره من الليل ويخلينا من هاي البيوت. الا انه راح تبقى رسالتنا موجوده في هذا المكان. يعني مش راح يكون سهل انه احنا نفرط ونطلع من هذا المحل. واذا بدي اتحدث عن الالم كبير، وهو قهر مش الم، هو اكبر من الالم، هو قهر. لانه يعني بتخيلش انه في يوم من الايام البيت اللي انا موجود فيه، يعني علي سهل انه البيت اللي انا موجود فيه يتم هدمه، يعني الجرافات البلدوزر تيجي وتهدمه للبيت. بس بكون اصعب علي اذا في مستوطن راح يطلعني من البيت اللي انا كنت عايش فيه في كل قصصي ويسكن فيه. وهذا راح يكون له تبعيات كبيره. يعني اذا بدي احكي عن اضطرابات نفسيه من تخصصي، هذا هو الاضطراب الكبير اللي ممكن يكون طويل الامد. لا انا ولا افراد عائلتي ولا اطفال العائله راح نتشافى منه في سهوله.
We as a family go to the courts, and despite our realization that the case is lost, but everyone here believes that finally we have the justice, and even that everybody work to displace us from our houses. We will stay at our houses. Maybe we don't have weapons or force, and we don't believe in war and violence, but we resist by our thinking that we need freedom and we need justice, and we believe that our message will remain in our houses and our dreams. We are humans, even if we have now painful and complaining feelings, but we are stronger, that we know that finally those houses are our reality, and our way to say that we have the right to live.
يعني رسالتي اليوم لكل المتضامنين والشركاء انهم يتاكدوا انه في ناس موجودين هون، احنا مش اقليه يعني، وبرفض انه يتم التعامل معنا كاقليات. بالعكس احنا يعني شيء متجذر في هذا المكان وفي هاي الارض، ومن حقنا ناخذ فرصه، ومن حقنا انه نعيش، ومن حقنا انه يكون لنا حياه كريمه. احنا كشباب يعني بنتمنى انه يكون في مستقبل في محبه، في سلام، في رسائل، يعني معيشه بين الكل والكل في هذا المكان، بدون ما حدا يقصي الثاني، وبدون ما حدا يعتدي على الثاني، وبدون ما حدا يقتل الثاني، حتى لنعيش بالاخر كلنا بنقدر نعيش، وكلنا بنقدر يكون لنا حياة كريمة مثل باقي دول العالم. وبنحكي لهم انه احنا يعني صامدين، يعني احنا راح يكون ممكن القوة هي الوحيدة اللي راح ممكن تكون حتى احنا نطلع، او حتى احنا يعني نطلع من بيتنا، يعني بس القوة. اما من غير هيك احنا مش راح يكون في بيوتنا، مش للبيع، مش للمساومة، مش للمقايضة، مش للمفاوضة، مش لأي شيء. بيوتنا إحنا بالنسبة لنا هي كل شيء.
The message today to all who see the same thing as we see, and who is a partner in the same vision. We are not a minority. We are not without rights, and we have the right to live. As young people, we hope that there will be solutions in the future. We believe in peace and security, and we think that this country can hold everyone. there is no reason to think that we hate each other, or we have to kill or exploit anyone. Everyone can live here without hurting each other. And the only force that can get us from our houses and from our neighborhood is death. So our houses are not for sale, are not for demolishing, are not for evacuated. Our homes are what we are, and we have the right to save them and to be in a safe environment.
Thank you, Dr. Amani and Kutaybah. We have a couple of questions in the chat to all the panelists. One question is from Smadar Meiri. Are there international organizations that are aware of this eviction notice since it concerns so many Palestinian families?
Yeah, I saw some of the questions. Part of what we're doing is to try to raise the issue in international institutions and organizations. I myself did several such webinars or briefings to diplomats. We brought diplomats to Baton el-Hawa. We are trying as much as we can to make it an issue. It's very hard, unfortunately. Our issue, all the issue of the conflict and the occupation is very low rating right now. Now, after the elections in the US, we see some more hope and therefore more chances to build up. And I believe that we will be able to have more awareness in the international community. And I think it's a key to change where we are heading. As I said, it's not a legal matter. It's a political move that is orchestrated and organized by a settler movement, but with the direct help of the Israeli government. And therefore, it is a political issue that will only be stopped by the political powers. And unfortunately, today, our pressure on the government is not enough, and we need also help from friends from abroad to make it clear to the Israeli government that such development is not agreed. And why do I say that it's a political matter, or what the government can do? I'm sure if you will call the Israeli government, they will tell you, oh, it's a legal matter. We are not intervening in court cases. However, there are two things they can do. Immediately, they can avoid sending the police and say, you know, we cannot send the police right now. It's not a good timing, etc. And they can postpone the eviction. And the second thing, which is more to solve the issue, is, as I told you, Israel allowed itself to confiscate land from Palestinians in order to build the neighborhoods for Israelis in East Jerusalem. Actually, 24,000 dunams were confiscated by Israel since '67. The government can allow itself to confiscate 10 dunams, 20 dunams from settlers and for the housing of Palestinians. So the government can intervene and say enough and compensate the settlers and finish this disgrace.
If I can also say that international institutions are existing, but we need to educate them and draw everyone to know about our issue. And we are trying to educate the international community about what's happening in Jerusalem and in Silwan exactly. We are trying to attract political views to see real actions, not only word supports, but real position in neighborhood. So we write letters for foreign ministries, and we inform everyone about what's happening, and we wait to see a real work from international institutions.
Another question we have is what is the connection between the evictions in East Jerusalem to demolitions of Palestinian homes elsewhere in the West Bank and rising settler violence against Palestinians? It goes to all the panelists.
It's not necessarily connected. I don't think it's the same story. There are several bad trends that could live in parallel.
يعني بفكر في القدس الموضوع معقد أكثر ومختلف. يعني حتى نوع الحرب اللي إحنا هون موجودة في القدس هي حرب من نوع تاني. في غزة ممكن نشوف أشياء ونسمع أصوات. في الضفة الغربية في كمان شغلات بنشوفها. هون الموضوع مختلف معقد كتير كتير كتير. لا يعني بنحكي هون عن حرب صامتة ما إلها صوت، ما بتسمع لهاش ولا صوت. ممكن احنا هون نحكي عن اللي بصير في سلوان في بطن الهواء وفي الشيخ جراح مثلا. يعني هون في ربط انه الموضوع هو مش موضوع بس سلوان، هو موضوع سلوان والشيخ جراح. من فتره سمعنا عن بيت صفافه كمان كان ينحكى عنه انه بده يعرضوه بده يتم عرضه في المزاد العلني في البلده القديمه داخل السور جوا البلده القديمه. الموضوع بصراحه يعني احنا بنتحدث عن جمعيات استيطانيه هي دوله جوا الدوله، هي عباره عن قوه جوا قوه. هي ماخذه كل الامكانيات كل الصلاحيات، عطيره كهانيم والعاد لهم كل الامكانيات ليعملوا بالشكل اللي هم بيشوفوه مناسب، والهدف واحد واضح اللي هو ايجاد اقليه فلسطينيه في هذا المكان مقابل اكثريه مستوطنه. وبنفس الوقت طبعا هم يعني معنيين في اكبر عمليه تهجير قسري وتطهير عرقي من خلال عده امور. طبعا البلديه بتساعد عبر هدم المنازل، واللي البلديه ما بتهدمه بتيجي الجمعيات الاستيطانيه بتطالب فيه كبيوت، ناهيك عن القوانين الثانيه املاك الغائبين واراضي مصادره وكل هاي القوانين اللي صممت حتى يعني الفلسطينيين يهاجروا. اخرها كان احنا كلنا بنشوف اخر قرار كان اللي هو كامينيتس هو تصمم اخرج تم اعداده بس عشان يعني عشان مين تم تصميم قانون كامينيتس اللي هو يعني اليوم احنا معظم البيوت اللي تم هدمها بالفتره الاخيره وحتى في الكورونا في وقت الكورونا كان يتم هدم البيوت. حاليا احنا عم نحكي مع بعض وفي بيت من 4 طبقات في منطقه العيسويه في بلده العيسويه الاهل فيه عم بيخلوا الاثاث منه لانه الصبح بلغهم المحامي انه غدا راح يكون في عندهم هدم. فكل هاي الممارسات والسياسات يعني لا اخراج الفلسطيني من هذا المكان.
As Kutaybah said, Jerusalem is a more complex situation because it's mainly different than West Bank because it's have many reasons. Maybe inside Jerusalem we have a connection between, for example, Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah, that they both have demolishing orders for many houses and evacuations for many houses. So in Jerusalem it's different because settlement association work in Jerusalem as a state within a state. They act as ethnic cleansing and as to have a minority of Arab people in Jerusalem. Here, if the municipality didn't demolish, they come and take the house in a different way, as the law of absent property or the law of Communities Act against facilitated. Now in this time there is a house in Al-Isawiya neighborhood that people in it are evacuated from their home because today they were given the order to be demolished tomorrow. So in Jerusalem, every neighborhood is having demolition or evacuation from the house in order to have the minority of Arab people in it.
Can I add? I saw some of the questions, and I think we don't have much time. I want to address three comments. One is about donations from abroad that the settlers have. Yes, we know for sure that there are Americans who donate to the settler movements in East Jerusalem. They have other sources that are unknown because usually they will use offshore companies that you cannot know who's the owner, etc. I can tell you that the body that is suing in Sheikh Jarrah, the tens of families there, is owned by a company that is registered in Delaware, the US, and there is one person in the names of the companies who is a Canadian citizen, in fact, that is probably funding this, or I don't know. So yes, there is involvement of that, and maybe this is something to look at. And a comment that I saw also that I feel very important to me to say, you know, I was talking about a two-state solution, and of course we are here about a humanitarian issue, about the injustice that is about to happen to thousands of people that should be stopped. But I think also the context is important, and for me it's very important that if people believe, it's so hard today to believe that the two-state solution is still possible, but I think the alternative to that is the ongoing apartheid, and to imagine that Israelis will one day wake up and say, okay, let's give all full rights and have one state and it will be a great solution is much less realistic than Israel waking up and saying, okay, we cannot continue occupation. It's better that there will be a Palestinian state side by side with Israel, rather than giving them all full rights. So not because I think it's a bad idea, but because it's not realistic. And I think what is very bad is that people, because they don't see the two-state solution to be realistic, so they think we should leave it or give up on it, and then the settlers can continue to do anything they want, because anyway, it doesn't matter. It's going to be one state, so why fight against it? So it's undermining the fight against the occupation, in my opinion.
So we've come to, thank you very much. We've come to the end of the hour, and there's so many more questions to ask. I wonder if Hagit and Kutaybah would be willing to stay for one more question, which I'll ask Daniela to ask if she wishes. And then I think we unfortunately have to wrap it up. And I will just say my final remarks here is to thank you both, all of you, for your participation. And it's been very interesting, and we could go on for a long time, but our time is almost done. So if you have could stay for one more question, and then we'll have to say goodbye. So Daniela, would you like to ask one more question from the
So we have a question from Awad from the audience. They're saying the issue of Palestinian residents in East Jerusalem will not be solved through a biased judicial system. What would be the reaction of the speakers if there is a greater acceptance of the Pope's suggestion to declare Jerusalem as an international city? So just to hear your thoughts, Hagit and Kutaybah and Dr. Amani.
I think I would rather to have a solution that is agreed by the two sides, and not necessarily that my city will belong to the international community, but I think rather we will rather to have it either shared or you know, parts will be controlled by Israel, parts will be controlled by Palestinians. But if that's a solution that agreed by the two sides, I would be happy. The problem is that it's not where we are at. We are still in a situation of ongoing occupation and a legal case that is a political move, which is going to end, to exhaust all the legal efforts. Some of the cases already got to the Supreme Court. And by the way, the Supreme Court invited the state to, the state attorney to say, what do you think about it? It's a rare move by the court to say in civil issues, to say to the states, what do you have to say about it? But because it's such a delicate issue and with far-reaching consequences, we have here a chance, and the Attorney General has another 2 weeks to give its answer and to say, this is my opinion. And most likely the state's attorney is going to say, yeah, it's okay, it's legal, it's fine. But maybe it's an opening for us for more pressure and to say, you know, government of Israel, you cannot say we are not responsible if you are now part of the case and you are saying that it's okay. You're actually making, you know, you're not passive anymore. So that's another point to remember.
يعني أنا بفكر إنه اليوم إحنا في أمس الحاجة لاستمرار تضامننا، وهذا اللي اليوم يعني موجود من خلال هذا اللقاء اللي صار. بفكر كتير مهم موضوع الضغط والمناصرة يضل مستمر، وعلى مستوى يعني حتى دول العالم يكون في رسائل حقيقية بتنبعث لعنا هون. بعرفش شو شكل الرسائل هاي، من خلال السفارات، من خلال ما بعرف شو الوسيلة، ولكن بفكر هذا الموضوع كتير مهم. وبنفس الوقت يعني البلدية هون لها دور كبير في هذا الموضوع، بلدية. وبنفس الوقت الجمعيات الاستيطانية، يعني احنا عارفين من وين عم بيكون الإشكالية ومع مين. يعني احنا ملامسين واضح بالنسبة لنا وين المشكلة. فبفكر هم يعني شركائنا والمتضامنين معنا هم اليوم اللي يعني احنا وياهم ممكن بحاجة لنعمل مع بعض برين ستورمينج ونعمل عصف ذهني ونفكر جد شو الخطوات الحقيقية. احنا من فترة طلعنا لبلفور وأوصلنا صوتنا ووصل صوتنا، وكان يعني رسالتنا كانت كبيرة باتحادنا مع بعض ووجودنا مع بعض بهذا اليوم. وصلنا رسالة ووصلنا صوت. بس بفكر انه هذا الاشي كمان لازم يكون في لجان قانونية، لازم يكون في معانا احنا قانونيين من كل الاماكن اللي هي داعمة لعدالة هاي القضية. يكون في لجان قانونية تيجي وتعمل من خلال مؤسسات والمتضامنين اللي معنا يعملوا إشي مهني بفايلات قانونية. وهاي يكون لها كمان احنا في عم بيكون محاكم اتجاهنا، وعم نروح للمحاكم وعم نستنزف ماليا وعم نستنزف نفسيا وعم نستنزف في كل الأصعدة. ويكون في كمان محاكم. ما بدي أنا اليوم أجي أفكر وأحكي شو الأداة اللي ممكن إحنا تضغط على الدولة عندنا هون حتى توقف هذا الأبارتهايد والتمييز العنصري اللي عم بيصير معانا. بس بفكر إنه في أجل وقت إنه إحنا كمان نحكي كفى وبكفي.
International lobbying and advocacy is one of the ways for solution. Also, we need a realistic solution that is good for all parties and should be taking in view the weakest party into account. Dealing with, we know what is the base of the problems. For us, it's from the municipality and from the settlement associations. So we have to go for the legal international community and see how could we achieve justice by the international law and the solidarity of international countries to seek for a solution for what's happening here against people in Jerusalem.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think we're out of time. Unfortunately, the hour is over. It always goes too quickly. I thank you so much for being here with us. I wish you good luck, Kutaybah, Dr. Jami, and Hagit, Ofran, and of course we are here to try to help and support. And thank you, everyone who listened, and stay safe, everyone. Consider a donation to Canadian Friends of Peace now, and I hope to see you again one day, and best of luck.
Inshallah.
Thank you.
Inshallah. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Daniela, too, for participating and being such a good moderator. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you very much.